8-year-old Bella Johnson, her bright eyes full of hope, stepped onto the yellow school bus for the first time in her new neighborhood. Her mother, Nina, waved goodbye, her heart filled with dreams of a brighter future for their family. But as the bus doors shut, neither could have foreseen the troubling journey that awaited Bella. Mr. Joshua, the elderly bus driver with a warm, grandfatherly presence, hid a darker side behind his kind smile, a secret that would soon disrupt Bella's life in ways her parents never imagined. As weeks passed, Nina's instincts began to whisper that something was off. Living in a predominantly white neighborhood, she struggled with how to voice her suspicions about Mr. Joshua, a long-standing, respected bus driver. Her growing fears seemed unthinkable to share, fearing it would be dismissed or worse. What unspeakable events might be unfolding on that bus? Little did she know that her determination to protect Bella would lead to revelations that would shock the community. Before we dive deeper into this gripping tale of courage and justice, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. If you're intrigued by this story, don't forget to subscribe. The warm summer breeze stirred the leaves of a large oak tree in front of the modest two-story house. As the moving truck rumbled away, leaving a small family on their new front lawn, Bella, an energetic 8-year-old with curly hair and bright eyes, bounced on her toes, taking in the unfamiliar sights. Her mother, Nina, gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "What do you think, sweetheart?" she asked with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Bella tilted her head thoughtfully. "It's different," she finally said, "but I like the tree. Can we hang a swing?" Nina laughed, her shoulders relaxing. "Maybe, once we're settled in." Bella's dad, Malcolm, joined them, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's the last of the boxes. How about we order some pizza and call it a day?" They nodded eagerly, heading into the house, catching curious glances from the neighbors. They were, after all, the only black family on the block, perhaps in the entire neighborhood. Later, they sat around a box, using it as a makeshift table, and Malcolm raised a slice of pizza. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice hopeful. Nina and Bella clinked their slices with his, a small gesture of unity. They discussed their dreams for this new chapter. "No more commuting for me." Nina's eyes sparkled. "I can work on my designs right here." Malcolm nodded proudly, "And I know you'll impress them at the new firm." "It's a bit of a drive, but it's worth it." Bella, her mouth full of pizza, asked, "Do you think I'll make friends?" Nina and Malcolm shared a brief, uncertain look. "Of course, sweetie," Nina assured her. "You're smart, kind, and funny. They'll love you." Malcolm added, "Just be yourself, Bella. That's all you need to do." The family continued talking, their voices filling the house with warmth and hope. They shared dreams, plans, and visions of the memories they'd make here. Yet beneath the excitement lay a hint of uncertainty about the challenges this new place might bring. They were stepping into uncharted territory, a predominantly white neighborhood that might not be as welcoming as they hoped. Nina and Malcolm had debated the move at length, weighing the opportunities against potential challenges. "We're doing this for Bella," Malcolm had said during one of their late-night talks. "Better schools, safer streets. She deserves every opportunity." Nina had agreed, but now, as she looked around their new living room cluttered with boxes and unfamiliar shadows, a sense of anxiety crept in. Would they truly be accepted here? Would Bella be able to thrive? Sensing her mother's unease, Bella snuggled beside her on the couch. "I'm glad we're here together," she said simply, placing her small hand in Nina's. Nina squeezed her daughter's hand, a surge of love and protectiveness washing over her. "Me too, baby," she whispered. "Me too." The family spent the rest of the evening unpacking essentials and preparing for the next day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Malcolm's first day at his new job, and more importantly, Bella's first day at her new school. As Nina tucked Bella into bed that night, and a room still filled with unpacked boxes, she paused to smooth her daughter's hair. "Are you excited about tomorrow?" she asked. Bella nodded, her eyes wide. "A little nervous, too," she admitted. "That's okay," Nina reassured her. It's normal to feel nervous about new things. But remember, you're brave and strong. You've got this. Bella smiled, her fears melting away under her mother's loving gaze. Thanks, Mom. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. As Nina closed Bella's door, she leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. She hoped with all her heart that tomorrow would mark the beginning of something wonderful for all of them, especially for Bella. In their bedroom, she found Malcolm already in bed, scrolling through his phone. Checking the route to work again, she asked, climbing in beside him. He nodded, putting the phone down. Just making sure I don't get lost on my first day, he chuckled, then added more seriously, how's Bella? Nervous, but excited, Nina replied. I think she'll be okay. Malcolm wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. And how are you? Nina sighed, resting in his embrace. The same, I guess. Nervous, but excited. She paused, then softly added, I just hope we made the right decision, Malcolm. We did, he said firmly. It might not be easy at first, but we're together. We can handle anything as long as we have each other. As they drifted off to sleep, the house settled around them, creaking and sighing as if adjusting to its new occupants. Outside, the stars twinkled over their new neighborhood, holding the promise of both challenges and triumphs ahead. The next morning, the early sun cast long shadows across the driveway as Nina and Malcolm stood with Bella, waiting for the school bus. Bella clutched her new backpack tightly, her eyes darting up and down the street. You've got your lunch? Nina asked, smoothing Bella's hair for what felt like the 100th time. Bella nodded, patting her backpack. And my notebook and pencils. You're all set, champ, Malcolm said, kneeling down to Bella's level. Remember what we talked about. Bella's face grew serious as she recited, be myself, be kind, and if something makes me uncomfortable, tell a teacher or you guys right away. Malcolm smiled, giving her a quick hug. That's my girl. The distant rumble of the bus engine caught their attention. As the yellow school bus rounded the corner, Nina felt her heart race. This was it, the moment they had both been anticipating and dreading. The bus pulled up, its doors creaking open. The driver, a middle-aged white man with graying hair, glanced at them. Surprise flickered across his face before being replaced with a neutral expression. Good morning, he said politely, though not warmly. You must be new to the route. Nina forced a smile. Yes, we just moved in. This is Bella, she'll be riding with you. The driver nodded curtly. Welcome aboard, Bella. I'm Mr. Joshua. Bella hesitated for a moment, looking back at her parents. Nina gave her an encouraging nod, and Malcolm whispered, You've got this, sweetheart. Taking a deep breath, Bella climbed the steps. As she disappeared into the bus, Nina and Malcolm caught glimpses of the other children inside, some curious, a few smiling, but a couple wearing expressions that made Nina's stomach tighten. As the bus pulled away, Nina and Malcolm stood hand in hand, watching until it rounded the corner. She'll be fine, Malcolm said, giving Nina's hand a reassuring squeeze, but the uncertainty in his voice mirrored the worry in Nina's heart. The day seemed to drag on for Nina. She tried to focus on setting up her home office, but her thoughts kept drifting to Bella. Was she making friends? Were the teachers kind? Was she feeling out of place? When the time came for Bella to return, Nina found herself pacing by the window, waiting for the familiar rumble of the bus. When it finally arrived, Bella bounded down the steps, her backpack bouncing. Hi, Mom. Bella called, waving as she ran up the driveway. Hi, sweetie. How was your first day? Nina asked, hugging her daughter tightly. Bella's excitement was contagious as she recounted her day, the nice teacher, the girl she sat next to at lunch, the cool playground equipment. Nina listened, relief washing over her. It seemed like things had gone well. That evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Bella continued sharing stories from her day. Malcolm, home from his first day at work, listened intently, asking questions and laughing at Bella's animated descriptions. But as the conversation quieted, Bella suddenly said, "Our bus driver is kind of mean." Nina and Malcolm exchanged surprised glances. "What do you mean, honey?" Nina asked gently. Bella shrugged, looking a bit uncomfortable. "He just says things that aren't very nice sometimes," she mumbled, quickly changing the subject. Nina caught Malcolm's eye, concern reflected in his expression. But they didn't press the issue, not wanting to dampen Bella's otherwise positive first day. Later that night, as Nina and Malcolm prepared for bed, Malcolm brought it up again. "What do you think Bella meant about the bus driver?" Nina asked as she sat on the edge of the bed, her voice filled with concern. Malcolm sighed, running a hand over his face. "I'm not sure. It could be nothing, maybe he's just a little gruff, but then again, it could be something more," he finished, the worry in his voice matching her own. "Should we ask her more about it?" Malcolm suggested. Nina shook her head slightly. "Not yet. Let's give it a few days, see if she brings it up again on her own. We don't want to make her anxious if it's really nothing." Malcolm nodded, though the worry lines on his forehead betrayed his concern. Nina shared the same unease, a gnawing feeling that something wasn't quite right. They both settled into bed, but sleep didn't come easily for Nina. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Bella's words in her mind. "He just says mean things sometimes." What kind of mean things? And why? The question swirled in her head, keeping her awake late into the night. In the weeks that followed, their lives settled into a new routine. Malcolm left early every morning for his long commute, while Nina worked from her freshly organized home office. Bella continued to take the bus to school, and life in their new home began to feel more familiar. But despite the surface calm, Nina couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. She noticed subtle changes in Bella's behavior. The once talkative girl who had eagerly shared every detail of her school days now responded with short, indifferent answers when asked about her day. One afternoon, while taking a break from work, Nina found Bella sitting by the living room window, staring outside with a distant expression. "Bella," Nina called softly, sitting down beside her. "Is everything okay?" Bella seemed startled, as though she'd been lost in thought. "Yeah, Mom. I'm fine," she replied, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Nina gently stroked her daughter's hair. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? Whether it's school, friends, or anything else," she added, leaving the end open in hopes that Bella would fill in the blank. But Bella simply nodded, leaning into her mother's touch without saying a word. Later that evening, with Malcolm working late, Nina decided to broach the subject again. Sitting beside Bella on the couch, she casually asked about her day. Bella gave her usual short responses, so Nina gently brought up the comment Bella had made about the bus driver weeks earlier. "Remember when you said the bus driver sometimes says mean things?" Nina asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Has anything like that happened again?" Bella's small body tensed immediately, her hands nervously fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "It's nothing, Mommy," she said, but her voice trembled slightly. Nina noticed Bella's eyes darting around the room, almost as if she was afraid someone might overhear. Nina's heart ached at the sight. "Bella, sweetheart," she said softly, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. "You know you can tell me anything, right? If someone is being mean to you, or if you're scared, I need to know. I'm here to help you." For a brief moment, it seemed like Bella might open up. Her lower lip quivered, and tears welled up in her eyes. But just as quickly, she pulled away, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really? Can I go play in my room now?" Nina nodded, her heart heavy as she watched Bella hurry off. Something was definitely wrong, but she felt powerless to understand what it was. When Malcolm finally got home that night, Nina shared her concerns as they prepared dinner together. She told him about Bella's strange behavior and her gut feeling that something wasn't right. She also mentioned her unsuccessful attempts to get Bella to talk. Malcolm listened quietly as he stirred the pasta sauce, his brow furrowed. When she finished, he sighed heavily. "Nina, I think you might be overreacting," he said, his voice tired. "Bella's just adjusting. It's a big change for all of us." Frustration flared in Nina. "Malcolm, you haven't seen how she's been acting. I really think—" Malcolm cut her off, his voice rising slightly. "I have enough to deal with at work, Nina. I don't need this on top of everything else. Just let it go. Bella's fine. Don't make this into something it's not." The kitchen fell into a tense silence, the only sound coming from the bubbling sauce. Hurt and anger churned inside Nina as she turned away, feeling unsupported. Malcolm, realizing his outburst was too harsh, regretted his words but didn't know how to take them back. They finished cooking in silence, the tension thick between them. At dinner, Bella sensed the unspoken strain between her parents. "Is everything okay?" she asked cautiously. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Malcolm said quickly, forcing a smile. "How was your day?" Bella launched into a carefully edited version of her day, while Nina pushed her food around her plate, her appetite gone. She caught Malcolm's apologetic glance, but couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. That night, as they lay in bed with their backs turned to each other, Nina couldn't sleep. Her mind raced, replaying Bella's words and her increasingly withdrawn behavior. Her maternal instincts screamed that something was very wrong, but Malcolm's dismissal of her concerns made her feel alone and unsure. What if she was overreacting? What if Bella was just adjusting, like Malcolm said? But then why did she have this persistent feeling of dread? Tossing and turning, Nina thought about the bus driver, Bella's silence, and the way their daughter seemed to retreat more and more each day. There had to be a connection. But what was it? As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Nina made a decision. If no one else was going to take her concerns seriously, she would find out the truth herself. Tomorrow, she would take matters into her own hands. With that resolution, Nina finally drifted into a restless sleep, unaware of the events that were about to unfold, events that would shake their family and change their lives forever. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, mirroring Nina's mood. As she went through the motions of getting Bella ready for school, the tension from the previous night's argument still lingered in the air. After Bella climbed onto the bus, Nina waved with a mix of worry and determination. Today would be different. Today, she would get answers. As soon as the bus pulled away, Nina sprang into action. Grabbing her car keys and a jacket, her heart pounded with nervous energy. Locking the front door behind her, she slipped into her car, hands trembling slightly as she turned the ignition. She glanced around, spotting a neighbor watering her lawn. The woman waved, and Nina forced a smile, hoping her actions wouldn't raise any suspicion. Keeping a safe distance, Nina followed the yellow school bus through the quiet suburban street. Nina's heart raced, a mix of determination and doubt swirling inside her. What if Malcolm was right, and she was blowing things out of proportion? But what if he was wrong, and Bella was in danger? As she followed the school bus on its route, she noticed something strange. At every stop, Bella seemed to be the last to board, even when other kids were standing nearby. Was it just a coincidence, or was there something more? At one stop, Nina thought she saw Mr. Joshua, the bus driver, say something to Bella as she got on. Her daughter's shoulders slumped slightly, but from this distance, Nina couldn't be certain. Was she imagining things? When they finally reached the school, Nina parked across the street and gripped the steering wheel, watching intently. Mr. Joshua helped the children off the bus with a smile, his graying hair visible even from afar. When Bella stepped off, he gave her a friendly pat on the shoulder. Nina felt a confusing mix of relief and doubt. From what she could see, Mr. Joshua seemed kind and professional. His interaction with Bella appeared completely normal. So why had Bella said he was rude? Why did she seem so uncomfortable when talking about him? As she drove home, Nina tried to reconcile what she'd witnessed with her instincts. Was she overreacting? Maybe Bella was just struggling to adjust to the new school and neighborhood. Yet, a nagging thought remained: what if Mr. Joshua had noticed her following him and altered his behavior? Back at home, Nina tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the events of the morning. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The pieces were there, but they didn't quite fit. By the time Bella came home from school, Nina had made a decision. She wouldn't tell Malcolm what she'd done, not yet. She needed more information before taking action. "How was school today, sweetie?" Nina asked as Bella walked through the door. Bella shrugged, her usual response these days. "Fine," she mumbled, heading to her room. Nina watched her go, her heart heavy. Something was definitely wrong, but how could she help Bella if her daughter refused to open up? That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Nina observed Bella closely. She noticed how Bella pushed her food around on her plate, avoided eye contact, and seemed to shrink into herself when Malcolm asked about her day. After dinner, while Malcolm cleared the table, Nina approached Bella. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "Do you want to watch a movie together?" Bella hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As they settled on the couch, Nina pulled her daughter close. For a while, they sat in silence, the light from the TV flickering across the room. "You know I love you, right?" Nina whispered suddenly. Bella looked up at her, surprise in her eyes. "I know, Mom. I love you too." Nina hugged her tighter. "And you know you can tell me anything. Anything at all." For a brief moment, Nina thought she saw something, fear, sadness, flash in Bella's eyes, but it disappeared just as quickly, replaced by a forced smile. "I know, Mom," Bella said, turning her attention back to the movie. Nina sighed inwardly. She hadn't broken through, not yet. But she wasn't giving up. She was determined to figure out what was wrong and protect her daughter. No matter what it took. As Bella drifted off to sleep in her arms, Nina made a silent vow. She would get to the bottom of this, whether Malcolm supported her or not. She needed to find out what was really going on with Mr. Joshua and the bus rides. And she would make sure her daughter was safe, no matter the cost. What Nina didn't know was that the truth would be far more shocking than she could have imagined. In the days that followed, events would unfold that would challenge their family in ways they never expected, forcing them to face harsh realities about their new life in this seemingly idyllic neighborhood. The next afternoon, Nina found herself at the local park, watching Bella play on the swings. Her mind was still consumed by questions from the previous day. As she sat lost in thought, a voice pulled her back to reality. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Nina looked up to see one of her neighbors, a middle-aged woman she recognized from down the street. The woman smiled warmly and gestured to the empty space beside her. "Mind if I sit?" "Of course, please," Nina replied, forcing a smile. As the woman sat down, Nina's mind raced. Maybe this was an opportunity, maybe she could get some insight into her concerns. "I'm Sarah, by the way," the woman said, extending her hand. "Nina," she responded, shaking Sarah's hand. "Nice to meet you properly." They chatted for a few minutes about the neighborhood, the weather, and the challenges of settling into a new place. Nina relaxed slightly, grateful for the distraction. But eventually, she gathered her courage and decided to bring up the subject that had been weighing on her. "Sarah," Nina began cautiously, "can I ask you something?" "It's about the school bus driver, Mr. Joshua." Sarah's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she nodded. "Sure, what about him?" Nina hesitated, then took a deep breath. "My daughter, Bella, she mentioned that Mr. Joshua was rude to her. I've been worried about how he treats the kids. I was wondering if you've heard anything like that from other parents or your children." The change in Sarah's demeanor was immediate and startling. Her warm smile vanished, replaced by an angry, cold expression. "How dare you," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "How dare you accuse Mr. Joshua of anything? He's been driving kids in this neighborhood for years. He's a good man." Nina was taken aback, her mouth opening in shock as Sarah's tirade continued. You just moved here, and you're already causing problems, acting like you know everything. If you don't like it, you're free to leave. In fact, I think everyone here would be better off if you did." The words hit Nina like a punch to the gut. The barely concealed hostility and racism in Sarah's outburst made her feel sick. She had suspected that not everyone in the neighborhood would be friendly, but this raw anger was more than she had imagined. "I'm sorry," Nina managed to stammer, rising from the bench on shaky legs. "I didn't mean to offend anyone. I was just worried about my daughter." Sarah stood up as well, her eyes cold. "Well, maybe you should teach your daughter to respect others instead of making up stories about good people," she snapped. With that, Sarah turned sharply and walked away, leaving Nina standing alone, feeling as if the ground had shifted beneath her. Across the playground, Bella had stopped swinging and was watching the scene, her eyes wide with concern. Nina forced herself to smile reassuringly at her daughter, though inside her mind was in turmoil. As they walked home, hand in hand, Nina's thoughts raced. Sarah's reaction had been so extreme, so out of proportion to a simple question. Was this how the entire neighborhood felt about them? Were they seen as troublemakers just for being here? More importantly, what did this mean for Bella? If an adult reacted this way to a question about Mr. Joshua, how would they respond if Bella ever came forward with a real complaint? That night, after Bella had gone to bed, Nina sat alone in the living room, replaying the day's events over and over in her mind. She hadn't told Malcolm about her conversation with Sarah. She couldn't bear the "I told you so" look she knew she would see if he dismissed her concerns again. But now, more than ever, Nina was convinced that something was terribly wrong. The puzzle pieces still didn't fit, but Sarah's overreaction had only strengthened Nina's determination to uncover the truth. As she finally headed to bed, exhaustion weighing heavily on her, Nina made a decision. She would keep investigating on her own, observing, listening, and gathering evidence. Once she had enough to validate her concerns, she would confront Malcolm, the school, and anyone else standing in her way. Little did Nina know, the truth she was seeking would arrive much sooner, and far more dramatically, than she ever anticipated. Her innocent question to Sarah would set off a chain of events that would shake their family to its core, challenging everything they believed and altering their lives forever. In the weeks following her unsettling encounter with Sarah, life at home took on a tense, uneasy calm. Both Nina and Malcolm were extra vigilant, keeping a close eye on Bella for any signs of distress. Surprisingly, Bella seemed to be improving. The gloom that had shadowed her in recent weeks was lifting, and she was talking more about school and her new friends. Nina found herself wondering if maybe she had been overreacting after all. Perhaps Bella had just needed time to adjust, and things were finally settling down. The thought brought Nina both relief and a pang of guilt. Had she really been on the verge of turning their lives upside down over nothing? One crisp autumn afternoon, Nina sat at her desk, engrossed in a design project for a new client. The house was quiet, save for the soft tapping of her keyboard and the occasional rustling of leaves outside. Glancing at the clock, she realized it was almost time for Bella to come home from school. She saved her work and headed to the kitchen to prepare an after-school snack, as was their routine. As she sliced apples and spread peanut butter on crackers, she caught herself humming, a sign, she realized, that she finally felt a sense of normalcy returning. 4 o'clock came and went, and although Bella hadn't arrived, Nina wasn't worried. The bus was often a few minutes late. She arranged the snack on a plate, set it on the counter, and returned to her office to answer a quick email. But when 4:15 arrived with no sign of Bella, a small knot of anxiety began to form in her stomach. She walked to the front window, peering out at the quiet street. Still no bus. By 4:30, Nina was pacing the living room, phone in hand. She called Malcolm, trying to keep the rising panic from her voice as she explained that Bella hadn't come home. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said, more to reassure herself than him. "Maybe the bus broke down, but I'm starting to get worried." Malcolm's voice was calm but tense. "I'm leaving work now. I'll be home as soon as I can. Have you called the school?" Nina shook her head, then realized he couldn't see her. Not yet. I wanted to check with you first. I'll call them now. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the yard, Nina's worry turned to full-blown panic. She called the school, her voice shaking as she explained that Bella hadn't made it home. All the buses have returned, the receptionist informed her. The school is closing for the day. But my daughter isn't home, Nina insisted, her voice rising. She has to be somewhere between here and the school. Can't you check? I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson, the receptionist replied sympathetically, but all the staff have left for the day. If she doesn't turn up soon, I suggest you contact the police. Nina hung up, her hands trembling. Call the police? How had a normal day turned into this nightmare? When Malcolm arrived home to find Nina in tears, frantically dialing the bus depot, they clung to each other, their worst fears running through their minds. This is all my fault, Nina whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. I knew something was wrong. I should have done more. I should have. Stop, Malcolm interrupted, pulling her close. This is not your fault. We'll find her. She has to be somewhere. Just as Nina was about to grab her keys and drive around the neighborhood, they heard the creak of the front door. Time seemed to freeze as they turned to see Bella walk in, 2 hours late, her yellow skirt wrinkled, her pink shirt askew, and her braids disheveled. Nina rushed to her daughter, wrapping her in a tight embrace. Where have you been? We were so worried, she cried, relief and fear battling in her voice. Malcolm joined them, enveloping both Nina and Bella in his arms. For a moment, they stood there, tangled in relief and emotions. But as Nina pulled back to look at her daughter, her relief turned to dread. Bella was pale, her eyes wide and brimming with unshed tears. She trembled, and her expression, a mix of fear, shame, and something else Nina couldn't identify, made her mother's heart tighten with anxiety. Bella, sweetheart, Nina whispered, gently cupping her daughter's face. What happened? Where were you? Bella looked up at her parents, her lower lip trembling. In a voice barely audible, she said the words that shattered their world, the bus driver did it again. The room went silent, the weight of Bella's words hanging in the air. Nina and Malcolm exchanged a horrified look as the full impact of what Bella had said sunk in. In that moment, all of Nina's fears, suspicions, and worries of the past weeks came crashing down on her. She had always known something was wrong, but now, seeing her daughter's haunted expression, Nina realized the reality was far worse than she could have ever imagined. She and Malcolm shared a horrified glance before gently guiding Bella to the living room couch. They sat on either side of her, offering comfort and protection. Malcolm held Bella's hand, while Nina softly rubbed her back, trying to soothe her. Sweetheart, Nina began, her voice firm but gentle, we need you to tell us everything. What do you mean by the bus driver did it again? What has he been doing to you? Bella hesitated, her small body trembling as she looked from her mother to her father, then down at her hands. After a long, tense pause, she began to speak, her voice shaking. Mr. Joshua, he doesn't like me. He doesn't like people like us. Nina and Malcolm exchanged a pained look over their daughter's head, their worst fears confirmed. Malcolm gave Bella's hand a reassuring squeeze, silently encouraging her to continue. Bella took a deep breath and began to recount the horrors she had been facing since her first week at school. Mr. Joshua, the bus driver, had been making subtle, racist remarks, comments that made her feel unwelcome and out of place. He would mutter under his breath as she boarded the bus or make snide comments about people not belonging in the neighborhood. When I told you he was rude before, Bella continued, her voice becoming more steady as she spoke, I was scared. I didn't know how to explain it. I thought maybe I was just imagining it. Nina felt a wave of guilt crash over her. She had sensed something was off but hadn't pressed hard enough. She hadn't protected Bella the way she should have. But then Bella dropped the bombshell that made her parents' hearts freeze. This wasn't the first time Mr. Joshua had left Bella stranded. He had done it a month earlier, dropping her off on a deserted road far from home. He had warned her not to tell anyone, threatening her with, "You'll regret it if you do. No one will believe you anyway, not someone like you." Nina pulled Bella into a tight embrace, her own tears now flowing freely. Malcolm stood, pacing the room, his fists clenched in fury. "Today," Bella continued, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder, "he did it again. He made me get off the bus, and I didn't know where I was. I was so scared, Mommy." As Bella finished her story, Nina and Malcolm were overwhelmed with a whirlwind of emotions, horror at what their daughter had endured, guilt for not realizing sooner, and a fierce, protective anger aimed at Mr. Joshua and the system that allowed this to happen. "I walked for a long time," Bella whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was too afraid to ask for help because he said he'd make sure everyone knew we didn't belong here." Malcolm knelt in front of Bella, his voice choked with emotion. "Bella, listen to me. What Mr. Joshua did is very wrong, and none of this is your fault. Do you understand?" Tears ran down Bella's cheeks as she nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Nina hugged her daughter even tighter. "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. You're so brave for telling us now." As Bella seemed to deflate, utterly exhausted, Malcolm and Nina exchanged a look filled with determination. They knew they couldn't let this go. Bella needed protection, and they had to make sure it never happened again. "Bella," Malcolm said gently, "we're going to call the police. What Mr. Joshua did is not just wrong, it's illegal. We have to make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else." Bella's eyes widened in fear. "But what if they don't believe me? What if he was right, and they think I'm lying?" Nina cupped her daughter's face, looking directly into her eyes. "We believe you, and we'll make sure they do too. No one is ever going to hurt you again, I promise." As Malcolm reached for the phone, Nina held Bella close, her mind racing. She remembered Sarah's hostile reaction at the park, the suspicious glances from their neighbors. Would the police even take them seriously, or would they face more racism and disbelief? But looking at her daughter's tear-streaked face, Nina knew they had no choice. They had to fight, not just for Bella, but for every child who might face discrimination and abuse. The sound of sirens grew louder outside their home. Nina steeled herself for the fight ahead. It would be hard. They'd likely face hostility, skepticism, and more prejudice. But they were ready to confront it together, as a family. They would fight until justice was served. When the police officers arrived, one older white man and a younger black woman, they introduced themselves and asked to speak with Bella and her parents. Over the next hour, Bella recounted everything, her words shaky but firm. Officer Brooks, the black woman, encouraged Bella to share as much as she could while Officer Thompson took notes, his expression difficult to read. When Bella finished her story, the room was filled with a heavy silence. Officer Thompson cleared his throat. "That's a serious allegation," he said cautiously. "Mr. Joshua has been part of this community for decades." Nina bristled, her anger rising. "Are you saying you don't believe our daughter?" Officer Brooks quickly intervened. "What my partner means is, we have to conduct a thorough investigation. This is a serious situation." "We understand," Malcolm said, his voice strained. "But our daughter has been traumatized. We need to know that you'll take this seriously." Officer Thompson nodded, though he still seemed skeptical. "We'll speak with Mr. Joshua and look into this further." As the officers left, Nina and Malcolm shared a look of resolve. They weren't going to let this go. They would make sure Bella's story was heard and that justice would be done, no matter how long it took. She spoke with conviction. This is about building a community where every child feels secure and appreciated. We need to consider the bigger picture, the biases and prejudices that made this situation possible. Her words seemed to resonate with those around her. In the following days, both black and white parents came together to form a diversity and inclusion committee. They started working on proposals for cultural sensitivity training, increasing diversity in hiring, and implementing a new system for reporting and addressing concerns. At home, Nina and Malcolm focused on Bella's healing. They found a therapist who specialized in helping children process racial trauma, and slowly but surely, they began to see glimpses of their lively, confident daughter returning. One afternoon, while Nina was helping Bella with her homework, there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see Sarah, the neighbor who had dismissed her concerns at the park weeks ago. I owe you an apology, Sarah began, looking down. I was wrong to ignore what you were going through, and I'm really sorry for how I acted. Nina was momentarily stunned. A part of her wanted to close the door and reject Sarah's apology. But then she thought of Bella and the future they were trying to build for her. Finally, Nina said, "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. As the months passed, Nina noticed more positive steps being taken in the community. The school implemented new policies, including cameras on buses and an anonymous reporting system for parents and students. Mr. Joshua's trial came and went, with multiple families testifying and evidence gathered by the police leading to his conviction and sentencing. On the day the verdict was announced, Nina held Bella close and whispered, "You did it, sweetheart. You were brave, and you made sure he can't hurt anyone else." Bella looked up at her mother with a small smile. "We did it, Mom. All of us." As spring arrived and the neighborhood blossomed with new life, Nina felt a cautious sense of optimism. There was still work to be done and challenges ahead, but they had chosen to stay and be part of the change they wanted to see. One sunny afternoon, Nina watched from her porch as Bella climbed onto the school bus. The new driver, a warm, kind woman of color, smiled at each child as they boarded. Bella turned and waved to her mother before finding her seat and chatting happily with a diverse group of friends. Nina waved back, her heart full of pride and hope. They had faced difficult times, but had come out stronger. They had turned a painful experience into a chance for growth and change. Most importantly, they had shown Bella, and others, the importance of standing up for what is right, no matter how challenging it may be. As the bus pulled away, Nina took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. She knew there would be more challenges ahead and that the work of creating a truly inclusive community was ongoing. But in that moment, she allowed herself to feel hope for Bella, for their family, and for a future where every child feels safe, valued, and at home.